Where do the long vowels go in an ancient Greek text? Where are the macrons? How do I know which vowels are long and which are short? Well, I'm going to tell you how to figure that out for any text in ancient Greek today. I'm Luke, and this is polýMATHY. So in this video, I'm going to tell you how you can figure out the regular places that these long vowels occur, and I'm also going to show you how to determine all the irregular cases, or rather, the stuff you can't just figure out necessarily if you don't know the word and the lengths that are in it. And I'm also going to tell you now exactly why this is so important. So ancient Greek is a language that is moraic, that is, its fundamental unit. The building block of the word is the mora. This is a timing unit. Languages are timed in different ways, by stress, such as English, by syllable, such as French, and by mora, such as Latin, classical Latin, and ancient Greek, classical Greek, and Koine Greek. That's Koine for your modern Greek speakers. I've spoken in great detail about the changing pronunciation of ancient Greek, and of course, at the very end of the Koine period, the ancient Greek language loses phonemic vowel length as it becomes medieval Greek. That's around the 6th century AD, and there's evidence of that happening in isolated cases before that. But for the vast majority of the ancient Greek language, it is one that is based on phonemic vowel length, based on this mora-timed concept, on this mora-timed nature of the language. And you can go see my variants of Lucian pronunciation video to learn all you need to know about the fundamental changes to the pronunciation of ancient Greek in antiquity. But today I'm going to concentrate on the classical Attic pronunciation because that is what the orthography is based on. Ancient Greek, whether it's written in the time of Plutarch or in the time of Xenophon, or even the text that we have from Homer, they're all regularized to the Attic spelling, the Attic Ionic orthography of 403 BC. So that's what we're going to concentrate on today, but when it comes to phonemic vowel length, even though the quality of vowels change during antiquity, the phonemic vowel lengths stay pretty constant through that period of about 1,000 years. So while it's perfectly fine to interact with ancient Greek in any pronunciation you want, even say the modern Greek pronunciation, the fundamental nature of the ancient language is based on these phonemic vowel lengths. And we see it, for example, in the accent system, where there are circumflexes, where there are acute accents, and that is indivisible from the phonemic vowel length. In fact, we'll be able to use those accents to help us determine phonemic vowel length, which we'll see a little bit later. But the really big point that I always want to emphasize is that the ancient Greek language, which we're talking about its literature, the literature, which is what we're interested in reading, that's why we're learning the language, most of us, it is fundamentally based on these differences of long and short vowels. So it's okay if we don't want to use them in your classroom or in your recitation, that's fine. But in order to understand the language, you absolutely have to understand where the phonemic vowel lengths are. Because if you don't, then you're interacting with the language through a filter that is alien, that is not something that is the fundamental nature of the language. I couldn't interact with Old English without understanding the phonemic vowel lengths either, just to understand the morphology and the grammar. But say I could understand it anyway and, muddle through, I still would be missing a lot in the literature. But when it comes especially to the poetry and the prose of ancient Greek is structured around these phonemic length differences in the vowels and the syllables. So it's something you have to understand to figure out what the author intends for their audience. If you want to end up interpreting and reciting it in a different way than they did, well, that's totally fine. Absolutely. But that doesn't excuse us from this fundamental knowledge of the language, which isn't always easy because not all the textbooks have the phonemic vowel length. They just assume you will learn them, like they assume you will just transfer your knowledge of Latin grammar onto ancient Greek because you already learned Latin before you learned ancient Greek, right? Didn't you already do that? A lot of irritating things like that. So let's look at the vowel system of ancient Greek. Here is a representation of the vowels in the trapezoid, the beautiful IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet Vowel Trapezoid. See this video where I told you how to interpret this IPA vowel chart thing. And this is my reconstruction of the vowels as precisely as I think is accurate for the majority of the speakers in Athens in 403 BC, or at least of the more educated ones. Now, I don't know if that's 60% of the people or 10%, but it is what the orthography, what the alphabet itself is actually telling us. See the video I did on polýMATHY Plus about the vulgar Attic pronunciation, which is very, very interesting. So go check that out if you want to find out a little bit more about what was going on and the extraordinary diversity that was actually present in Athens in the classical period. So here is a trapezoid of the vowels, and we of course have E, and that can be short or long. That's going to be a problem. We have to figure that one out. Now, below that, we have epsilon iota. In classical Attic, epsilon iota does not represent a diphthong. It is instead E. It's a closed E vowel sound, comparable to the German vowel in gien or in Italian vero. Exactly how high it should be isn't necessarily that important. The point is that it's between the E of the iota and, well, the next vowel quality, which we'll see. The next vowel quality is for the epsilon, and that one is short, and that one is probably best represented, I think, as a true mid-vowel E. So not necessarily a closed E or an open E, but E, in between those two. Something like the way it sounds in Spanish, or indeed modern Greek. Then, below that, we have the eta. The eta is E, and it's always long. So now we have two long vowels, two orthographic symbols for two long vowels that are always long. Epsilon iota is E, and the eta is always E. It is an open E vowel. Now, like I said, there might be some variation, certainly in the speaker or the mood or who knows, about how high or how low these could go, but these are relative differences. Then we get to the bottom of the trapezoid and we get the A vowel. And the alpha could be long or short. Its quality is not going to change, but it could be long or short, and it's going to be somewhere at the bottom of the trapezoid phonetically. A. It's like Italian or modern Greek. And there are differences in the sound of that letter in Italian and modern Greek, but it's close enough. It's not like most versions of English is the point. Up from that, we have the omega quality. So the omega quality is all, and it is always long. And it's going to be generally more open than the two other back vowels that we see here. One is the omicron. The omicron is the back vowel equivalent of the front vowel epsilon, which is a true mid-A. And the omicron, therefore, is probably best as an O, maybe slightly more closed. I think it makes sense to raise it because we have the omicron hypsilon. This is another digraph, just like epsilon iota. Omicron hypsilon, or upsilon, or however you want to pronounce it. That is not a diphthong in classical Greek, in classical Attic. It is simply U. So it's a closed vowel, similar to German Sohn or Italian sole. It's that O sound. How closed it should be, well, that is a question that depends on another vowel, which is the U. So the U vowel, the hypsilon vowel on its own, can be long or short, and how we reconstruct it makes a difference. If we reconstruct it as being identical to the position in the mouth, the articulation of the iota, except rounded, so instead of E, it's U, very much how it sounds in French, for example. Well, it gives us a lot of space in the back for the omicron hypsilon digraph to go from O to eventually U. I don't have any doubt that by, say, the Roman period, the late Hellenistic period, that this is indeed U, much as it is in Latin, its Latin equivalent, U. And it's always long, of course. But exactly how quickly that change occurred, or if there are many varieties at the same time, I think all of those possibilities are valid. My reconstruction places the omicron hypsilon as being not necessarily U, but a little bit lower U, something between that closed U and U, a little bit like how a lot of Scottish speakers sound, either when speaking Scots or English. They have a vowel inventory that's actually pretty similar. And the U, of course, like we mentioned, could be long or short, and that could be really far front U, it could be more back U. It doesn't have to necessarily be totally to the front, that vowel. Now, I just want to cover all that so you know the basic vowel inventory for reconstructed classical Attic right in the middle of the classical period, about 403 BC, because that's when the orthography was established, and that's what matters to us especially. So we have vowels that are always short, the epsilon and the omicron. They're always short in length, so we don't need to put any macrons on them. The epsilon iota, that's always E, so that's a long vowel. If you're pronouncing it A, know that's a characteristic of the Erasmian pronunciation, and it is not a valid reconstruction of the ancient Greek language. So if you possibly can, stop doing it. You can keep everything else about Erasmian if you want, or just watch the Lucian pronunciation variants video and just use the Pompeian reconstruction of ancient Greek and the Lucian pronunciation system, because that will be more historically accurate. Anyway, the point is that epsilon iota in classical Attic is a long E sound. So that's always long. The other one that's always long on the front axis is the eta. It's always E, so that's a long vowel. And on the opposite side, the omega, it's the partner of the eta on the other side there. The omega is always long O, eventually raising to a more true mid O at some point later in the classical period and into the Koine period. And the other one that's always long is the digraph omicron hypsilon, which is always O or U or somewhere in between there. That means we have three vowel letters that could be long or short. The alpha could be A or A, the iota could be E or E, and the hypsilon could be U or U. And how do we know that? The writing system will give us several clues, such as with accents, which we'll talk about in context a little bit later. But in general, there's no way to determine them unless you already know the Greek language, the ancient Greek language, I mean. And that is highly irritating if you're a beginner or even an intermediate student, even advanced, and you're trying to learn this phonemic vowel length thing. Of course, a place you'll get plenty of exposure to phonemic vowel length and learn the entire ancient Greek language is with this video sponsor, the Ancient Language Institute. Now, the Ancient Language Institute, we give you what you need from day one using the direct approach, using the natural method. What is this? This is where you get input, because the teacher is going to be speaking to you in ancient Greek from day one, and you'll be responding to. It'll be an incredible thing because you're going to start from nothing, not knowing anything about the ancient Greek language, but you're going to be armed before you get into the very first lesson, because through Ancient Language Institute, you get access to all kinds of audio and visual materials, all the reading materials, so that when you get into your very first lesson in any lesson, you're already going to feel very prepared and ready to participate in this immersion experience of learning the ancient language of your choice. Ancient Greek, Latin, Hebrew, Old English, in this tried and true, an actual traditional approach, because the only way to really acquire language is through input, and Ancient Language Institute makes that possible not just through the guided lessons with your teacher, but also from all the other materials that are provided outside of class. And registration closes on April 13th, so make sure you sign up. You're definitely going to want to get lessons for the next trimester, because indeed, the academic year at Ancient Language Institute is divided into trimesters. This works out very well with scheduling, because you get to spend 2 trimesters for your beginner course and learning the basics of ancient Greek, or Latin, of course, and then you get to go to the intermediate. In intermediate ancient Greek, for example, you'll be getting a good introduction to biblical Greek and be preparing yourself for the higher level stuff. You get to read Xenophon and Plato and eventually also Homer, right? In fact, there is this summer the annual Ancient Language Institute full immersion ancient Greek language camp. And this summer, it's going to be all about Homer. You say you have a decent knowledge of ancient Greek, but you don't know anything about Homer?
That's a problem for future Homer.
That's right, because from July 20th to 29th is this year's Ancient Greek Immersion Camp, held at Wake Forest University in North Carolina. You're not going to want to miss it. Sign up today for the Greek camp at ancientlanguage.com, or for your course if you want to take ancient Greek or Latin. Beginner level cohorts also starting this summer, and there's intermediate and advanced courses as well. So go to ancientlanguage.com to find out all about those. So many of the Greek long vowels are actually right there in the orthography.
Good news, everyone!
But every time there's an alpha, iota, or a upsilon, we have no idea.
Bad news, everyone!
So basically, this is a good news, bad news thing. A lot of the long vowels in Greek are already there as a part of the orthographic system. Eta, omega, epsilon, iota, and the omicron, upsilon already demonstrate a lot of the long vowels. But the other 3, if you have a text where they're not written, especially a beginner text, it's extremely irritating, because how else could you possibly learn this fundamental thing? And in fact, something that I've learned is a lot of these authors of these graded readers and other things haven't a clue, and I figured that out because of the orthographic mistakes they make in the accents. Even if we only use like a modern Greek pronunciation or a Boothian pronunciation with ancient Greek, totally fine if you want to do that. The orthography of the language is standard, particularly this accent system thing. You have to know where the circumflex go. You have to know where the acutes go. And if you get that wrong, the meaning of the word is often different. Even if you're not rendering that as part of your pronunciation, it has to be there in the written system that you're using. But if you do happen to have access to a textbook that you're learning with, say the Athénèse series, that actually writes all the macrons, that's going to be one of your best ways to get a sense of where the long vowels are that aren't normally marked, especially if you're reciting in a way that recognizes the difference in the long vowels, if you're pronouncing them with the different lengths, long or short respectively. Even if that's not necessarily the best reconstruction of the pronunciation, that's not really what I'm concerned about. Right now in this video, I'm mostly concerned about how do you actually acquire this length thing. You have to give yourself the input of actually hearing yourself doing it the right way. That is, even if you're using modern Greek pronunciation, that you are making these distinctions of the ancient lengths of this ancient language. So where are the long vowels? Mostly we see this in the alpha. The iota and the upsilon don't necessarily have that many regular occurrences in the morphology, the endings of nouns and verbs and things like that. So let's take a noun like he Italia or he Sicilia. Italy, and the Sicily, or a non-proper noun like he philosophia, the philosophy. So these are all nouns. They're of the first declension, comparable to the Latin first declension, if you're familiar with that. The difference is that the first declension in ancient Greek can end in more than just a, like it does in Latin. Often we see a long a, a long alpha. Sometimes we see a short alpha, and sometimes we see an eta. And all of these can happen. The long alpha one, if we know the word is feminine, like he Italia or he philosophia, and we see an accent, an acute accent, right before this final vowel, we know that there's essentially no doubt that the alpha that's following is going to have to be long. I'm hedging a little bit because I'm trying to think if there's any possible exception, but there really isn't if it's a first declension noun. It's a regularity of the language. There are words like, say, glotta, that end in a short alpha. And if it ends in a short alpha, then it's not going to be long. Now, another way we know that alpha can't possibly be long then, because how would I know that? Well, it has to do with the accent. The accent in glotta is a circumflex. If you have a circumflex accent on the penultimate syllable, that is on the syllable before the last, if there's a circumflex accent there, that means the final vowel must be short. Even in the plural, for example, if you have glottai, and you probably know that diphthongs are long, I is indeed long. The difference is that when it's final, this is treated as the alpha, which is short, plus iota representing the J in IPA. So it sounds like a diphthong, I, but it's treated as alpha plus a consonant y. Phonetically, these are identical, but in the internal phonology and grammar of the speaker, these ancient Greek speakers, we can see that indeed, in classical Attic, it was treated as short because it was a short vowel plus a consonant. It doesn't matter if it ends with a consonant, making a long syllable, because syllable's long, but the vowel is short, and that's what the prosody, the accent system, is being affected by. And that's important, so I'll repeat it. The accents in ancient Greek, these pitch accents, these musical accents, very similar to, say, the Japanese language, these pitch accents are controlled entirely by the phonemic vowel length. So you have to know where the phonemic vowels are just to put the accents on the words. Interestingly, in the Doric dialect, usually the final omicron iota and alpha iota were actually considered to be long. They didn't actually do this thing where the final component was more of a consonant rather than a vowel. Neat variations. But then in the accusative plural of this word, the languages, the tongues, it's glottas. Glottas. There, it's always long. It's always a long alpha sigma in the first declension of these nouns, of these feminine nouns in this case. We'll see later there's masculine first declension nouns, unlike Latin. Latin has a few, but very few. And it's always a long as, so that alpha has to be long too. When it comes to feminine nouns like he shura or he eupemia, he philosophia, he sikelia, he italia, in those, because of where the accent is in these, the alpha is going to be long. And you may also know that in Ionics, like say Homeric Greek, these would all be rendered instead he philosophie and he italie, he sikelie, he eupemie. They're all with the letter eta, and that's always long. What essentially has happened is that in the Attic Ionic dialects, long alpha has generally raised to e, from a to e. That's just a feature of Attic Ionic, changing the long alpha a to e, something that Doric doesn't do, for example, except that Attic resists this change where that long alpha comes after an iota, such as in philosophia, Italia, or after the epsilon, or after the letter rho, like shura. In those situations, it retains the older long alpha and doesn't change to the eta, which is an innovation that Ionic kept carrying forward to more of an extreme. That makes Attic really cool. It's kind of in between. And thus also for the genitive singular, tes philosophias, tes Italias, and also the accusative plural, tas philosophias. The accusative plural for the first declension, those feminine ones, it's always going to be as anyway, and also for the masculines, but we'll get to that. And this is also true of the accusative for these that have the long alpha in the nominative singular. So, ten philosophian, ten Italian, ten Sicilian. Those will also be long, but not for the nouns that have the short alpha in the nominative, like he glotta. That's ten glottan. It's a circumflex. We see the circumflex written, and because it's a circumflex, we know that the final vowel has to be short. Doesn't matter that the syllable is long, the final vowel is short, and that's what determines the accent. And there are first declension masculine nouns, a whole lot of them in ancient Greek, in fact. We see these especially in proper names. And if we have the iota or eta that precedes them, then instead of being an eta, they will in fact be a long alpha, like in, say, Aeneas, Aeneas. That's a long alpha. And then, of course, the accusative, ton Aenean. It'll have to maintain that length, just like in ten pilosopian. And plenty of other masculine nouns of the first declension show this as well. Let's take hopolites, the citizen. In the accusative, we just have ton politan. Obviously, the eta is always long. In the accusative plural, though, we have tous politas. There it has to be long. So it's another way that we know that absolutely has to be long. Later, we'll figure out, well, how do we know that the e and the ites and the fundamental, the root of the word, why is that iota long? How we know? We'll figure that out later, so be patient. This is also true in words such as homathetes, the student. The accusative plural is tous mathetas. The accent is not going to help us. The accent is, however, very helpful in determining length in several situations. If there is a circumflex accent, the vowel underlying it is always long. So in those situations, there's no need to write a macron because it's always long. Just as we wouldn't write a macron over an eta, that would be superfluous, or over an omega, again, superfluous. So hopefully these principles are starting to help because these words, these first declension nouns, are super common. There are times where it might not be totally obvious, because if we have the article, we say he pilosopia, okay, or ten pilosopian, there's no doubt that's long. But what if you just get pilosopia? You'd have to know that it's pilosopia and not pilosopia with a short alpha. So what if you had a word like paidia, and you don't know if this is a feminine singular noun? You might not know what it means. In this case, this demonstrates how you have to know enough about the language in order to figure this out. And in this video, I am going to give you the tools to determine those sorts of things, how to look these things up very shortly. But in this case, paidia, this is the plural. It's the neuter plural of the word topaidion, which means a child, a little kid. Thus, the plural, tapaidia, that alpha has to be short because the neuter plural, that alpha, is always short. And there are other caveats. Say if you see something like tas naiadas. Okay, well, we know the tas, that's the article, that's going to be long. But what about the ending? It looks like the singular should be he naiada or naiade or something like that, right? And it's not, because this is a third declension noun. And the nominative is he naias, and it's short. That alpha's short there in that ending. There are a lot of these as, ados in the genitive, or adas, accusative plural. There are a lot of these endings of the third declension that happen in ancient Greek, and that alpha is always short. The third declension accusative plural is regularly as, alpha plus sigma masculine or feminine, and that alpha is always short, which is helpful. So again, caveat, right? You see a word like tugatera. You know this means daughter, and you see the alpha at the end, and it's after a rho. So you think, oh, well, is that long? Only if it were first declension. In this case, since it's third declension, alpha is often an ending in the accusative singular. It usually comes from adding a nasal sound, a na or a ma, in the Proto-Greek language to a consonant ending. So tugateren or something like that ends up becoming vocalized into a vowel in what we consider to be classical Greek. So tugatera. The nominative, of course, is not he tugatera, it's he tugater, and because of that, we would know it's okay, it's third declension, and it couldn't possibly have a long alpha. And thus also for the accusative plural, tas tugateras, and that's another short alpha. The accent rules, which are based on this underlying phonemic vowel length, can be very helpful, though, to make certain determinations. For example, the mother of Mercury, or of Hermes, rather, is Maia, right? It's Maia. Because there's a circumflex on the preceding syllable, on the antepenultimate syllable, that means that the final alpha can't possibly be long. However, in the genitive singular, tes maias, we know that alpha must be long because that vowel is always lengthened in the genitive singular of first declension nouns. Whereas before, the male student, mathetes, has it long eta, so it's always long, it's an eta, but the accusative, tous mathetas, that's going to be long. Well, what about a female student? Well, that's mathetria. Is the alpha long? It can't be, because the preceding syllable to that final alpha, the final alpha is that's the final syllable. The syllable that precedes it is the tri, and that iota is not accented. it would have to be accented matētria to make a long alpha. If it were accented and then it weren't a long alpha, then it couldn't even be a feminine noun of the first declension. It would be some kind of weird neuter noun. Anyway, that's not possible because this ending, this tria, is a very typical unaccented in the nominative ending for the feminine version of various masculine nouns of people like matētria or poiētria. Alpha can also regularly be long in certain verb forms, like say komissas, aorist participle, or komissasa. That's the feminine. Notice the accents in that word. See how the accent is on the antepenultimate syllable, on the third to last syllable? Well, that means the final alpha couldn't possibly be long, because if you have a final long vowel in Greek, that means that the accent has to be on the second to last syllable, on the penultimate syllable. It has to be. It's one of the accent rules. And the accent rules are an emergent property of the phonemic vowel length of all the vowels. That's why you have to know the vowel lengths. You just have to. You have to. It's not just a part of orthography. It's a part of the fundamental nature, morphology, and grammar of the language. So that participle, komissas, that's long, but not the indicative form, ekomissas. That is a short alpha, ekomissa, ekomissas, ekomisen, and so forth. That has to be a short alpha there. Again, how do we know that? From the accent. The accent is revealing the underlying structure of what's going on. Komissas alone, we wouldn't necessarily know that's a long alpha if we didn't know that's the participle and it's the masculine form of in the aorist and it's always that long as form and asa for the feminine. We wouldn't be able to figure that out necessarily because it is possible to have the accent on the penultimate syllable, then the following vowel is short. Happens all the time. Totally okay. So a lot of these hints and tricks I'm giving you today are really entirely supplementary to the learning of the language. And if you don't have a textbook that is marking this and you're beginner or intermediate or just trying to learn where the phonemic vowel lengths are, it's going to take work on your part to learn them.
Bad news, everyone!
Unfortunately. Ideally, we would just be in an environment with fluent speakers of, say, Attic, and with that input, getting lots of input from them all the time, we would eventually just pick all these things up and we wouldn't even need to learn how to read and write. We would just be fluent speakers ourselves. But for now, we're going to have to adapt what we have available, which are these written texts, and get the right phonology out of them through our own efforts. And speaking of that, we're going to move on to the non-morphology part of it, but more the how do you figure out all the rest of them?
Top secret news, everyone!
I just talked about alpha because that's the most salient long vowel thing that happens regularly in the morphology that you can determine and just know by looking at it half the time. And as long as you know the case and the gender and the declension and those sorts of things, you can determine these things and get a sense of the regular patterns with a lot of ease, relatively. Let's talk about other words. Let's say Legio. Legio, that upsilon, that is long. It's long in the indicative in the present tense. Legio, lues, lue. In the infinitive, luein. All right, it's regularly long. That's great. Okay, cool. What about in the other tenses? You betcha, luso in the future, and eluon in the imperfect, and elusa in the aorist. So that one's regularly long. That's great. Elusa. Notice, by the way, if you're new to this whole pitch accent and phonemic vowel length thing, you might think, oh, he's pronouncing it wrong, because you are mistaking the long vowel for a stressed syllable, which we're not even dealing with stress in this ancient Greek language. It's a pitch accent-based language. So, elusa, elusa. The high pitch is on the e, and the lu is on elusa, elusa, elusa. Many languages have that kind of prosody, that kind of pitch contour, and the penultimate syllable, the lu in this case, would in fact be the stressed one. Italian often does that, like say amare or cantare. You'll hear the falling pitch, and falling pitch is just part of the prosody of the sentence, and that gets mistaken for the placement of accents and so forth. Anyway, so this is all fundamental to the ancient Greek language, and I know it's hard and it's not familiar, but we have to do our best. So elusa, elusa, that is the structure of the language when it comes to the prosody and the more, the long and short vowels. Elusa. And then we have a problem because leluka is the perfect. Is that upsilon long? Could it be? Could it be long with the accent there on the le? Leluka? Yeah, that would be okay as far as accent rules go. But unfortunately, that's not what it is. It's leluka. It's short in the perfect. Why? That's a topic for another time. The point is that when we learn these verbs, and if we have a book that marks all of the long upsilons and the iotas and the alphas and the short ones, then we learn, oh, that one's short, and we need to pay attention to that if we want, or hopefully we'll unconsciously just absorb it through input, ideally. We need to learn that in order to understand the difference, because then when we get to literature that takes this into account, whether excellent prose, Demosthenes or Plato, or the poetry, we just need to know that. And a counterexample is puo, which is to grow, whether transitively or intransitive, right? It gives us pusis, nature, growth, right? And in puo and pusis, well, that's a short u. Okay, great. Well, that means it's short in all the other tenses, right?
Bad news, nobody.
Well, it's epune or epusa, depending on if it's transitive or intransitive in the aorist, and it's bepuka in the perfect. What's going on there? Well, there is an etymological explanation which may or may not be satisfying to you. The Proto-Greek word is constructed puyo, so there's a y in there, and that y falls out in different dialects. But in some dialects, it remains a little bit longer and ends up then lengthening the vowel to puyo. And there are other verbs that end in uyo like this in ancient Greek that are normally short, at least in Attic, and yet in the other tenses, always in Attic, we see bepuka, epusa, epune. We have the long vowel that's still there. So it's probably long because there was a y that ends up becoming sort of a diphthong and then just ends up compensatory lengthening that ends up happening and lengthening the vowel. Anyway, this is too complicated. This is too complicated for the kind of audience I'm trying to reach in this video. But that's how it ends up being a lot of the time. You have to look these things up. But how do you do that? That's kind of maddening. Now we're going to get to a few of the tools that you can take advantage of in order to figure out the long vowels to virtually any word in ancient Greek.
Good news, crybabies.
And later on in the video, we're going to take one of these ancient Greek readers. I really like this one, but for some reason it doesn't have the macrons in it. And I've been macronizing it on my own just so I can read it and enjoy reading it better, and so I can learn where certain long vowels go. So what we're going to do later on, stick with me in this video or skip to the appropriate part of the video. There's chapters in the timeline where I actually take you through what I do, how I go through the utilization of all these tools and all this knowledge in order to accurately macronize a text like this on my own. All right, I'm going to show you some of the digital resources that I make use of on a regular basis. In fact, I use them so often I have a bunch of them in permanent tabs up here in my Safari browser. So let us look at that word for the naiads, right? Those water nymphs. So if we were to type in, actually, let's do this. Let's type in this form. This isn't the nominative singular form, right? We saw naiadas. Can we type that in and get something? Okay, we get something. Naya, Festival of Zeus. Is this what we're looking for? Hey, let's look over on the left. Helps use a desktop version. And here we see, oh, look at that. There's this naya thing, but there's this naias and naias. Let me get this one that doesn't have the diaresis on it, and we see naias, naiados. This actually tells us all we really need to know now. Yes, it's feminine singular, and the fact that this is an acute accent and this is a short vowel means that this must be an inherently short vowel too. And we have, of course, this is from a French dictionary, this Bailey, Divinité des cours, okay, whatever. And then let's look at this one, and we'll maybe get something. There's a little bit more English. So we see nai. So this is rendered as a diaresis. So naias, naias. And then look at the ionic. Ooh, the ionic has an eta. This means that this is in fact a long vowel. Naias. The ionic has to be that eta. Anyway, we have our answer to that one. What about something like polites that we saw before? Polites. And we see that. And look at the, we have a macron. This is great. So the logion, the LSJ often gives us macrons, which is really nice, but not all the time. I'll show you where it doesn't. Pilosopia. Okay, pilosopia. You don't even need to write the accents perfectly. You'll often get something, and we see a short iota here, and then, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be a long alpha. Why is it not giving me a long alpha? That's pretty irritating. It is irritating. And it's like that because you just have to know that when you see this, that it's feminine, he, and that ends in this, ia, that the alpha has to be long. That's taken for granted as part of your knowledge. Super irritating, I know, but they just wanted to save ink, I guess, and not teach you anything. So be it. Well, what about something like luo? Oh, okay, we get that in... well, this one's not marked. Latin luo is the connected one, cognate, that's cool. But is it Eluon short or is it Eluon? It's not marked. Here it's marked Luso in the future. The middle, Lusomai, not marked. But we know that the middle would have to be long because it's part of the root, right? Okay, but even though it's not marked, why are you not marking it? Are you trying to save ink? Okay, probably saving ink. So Elusamen, that one's probably long. But Leluka, see how it's marked short? So that one's definitely short in the perfect regularly. Okay, that's fine. But then if you get something like Puo and see, okay, Puo, but then the alec is Puyo. It's retaining this yod that's there. So is it Epuon or Epuon? And we see Puso. Is it short? Oh, wait, look. It's marking the hypsilon as long here next to it instead of in the actual term. I don't know why it does that, but that's how this dictionary works. I know it's chaotic, but you'll get used to it. It's the best tool we have. I know. Someone make a better tool. There is actually another version of LSJ that's out there, which is the lsj.gr website, which is also very nice. Like here's hoplites, and here's the long vowel marked, full diacritics. That's nice. Medium diacritics, low diacritics, capitals, and then pretty much all the same information from the English LSJ and the other dictionaries, which you find on the same website that we were just on. Some of this, some of it's not on there. It consolidates them all. But Logion has some advantages that we'll see soon. Pretty soon we're going to look at one of these readers and actually mark it up with the macrons. We're going to do that together. I'm going to show you how I actually accomplish that. So if we're patient with something like this, there's the pepuka, we can figure a lot of this out. And we can see a lot of variation and dialect and so forth. Ancient Greek is not written in one dialect, even though we tend to concentrate on Attic and Koine. The other dialects are relevant to our understanding. So we have to get a pretty sophisticated knowledge just to work with this material. One thing we can do, though, especially with these words, is go to Wiktionary. Wiktionary is extraordinarily helpful. Thank goodness for all the people who have taken the time to do all this for us. Because if we go to Puo, here, we see Puo. Here it's written as short. And yet in the other parts of the declension, we could expand this if we wanted to. We see the future is Puso. It's long. The imperfect is short, which makes sense because the imperfect's based off of the present. So Puso, the aorist Epun or Epusa, respectively, and Pepuka. And there's some variation here for epic and koine and things like that. But generally, we can trust Wiktionary to give us the right thing. We see Pusis is short, Puton, that's short as well, Putor, but Pulon, that one's long. Usually the root of the word, its vowel is going to be consistently long or short, and sometimes they switch around, like this lovely word. Luo as well, just to show you, long in the present, and it's long in the elusa, in the aorist, and in the future, but the perfect is deluka. But the future perfect is delusamai. So with these variations, how do we pick this up? Ideally, because we have people who are fluent in Attic speaking to us for hours and hours and hours until we acquire the right sound and therefore the right vowel length. Or if we're just learning but through reading, then we actually have it written in the text we're using, say Athenese, and if they're not there, then we have to add them ourselves. It's very unfortunate. We have a lot of obstacles we have to get over. This is climbing Parnassus, learning these languages. Unfortunately, there aren't the materials that there ought to be at this time. And the textbooks have been printed without this absolutely, completely necessary thing in order to be able to deal with the language. So anyway, on behalf of all of these textbooks, which should do better, I apologize, I guess. Now, one more place we can go is to the Latinitium Latin Dictionary. These are, of course, fantastic. You can increase the size a little bit, make it easier to read. So let us, in fact, the naiads got to be mentioned, right? Oh, they are, absolutely. And look, we already have the information we need. We see the initial alpha is long. It is not a diphthong, otherwise it would be rendered as AE in Latin, I. And so these are definitely separated as in diaresis, right? And we see here all the vowel lengths we need. This as is short. This kind of short as, naias. Of course, it's accented in Greek, but the Latin accent is a stress accent, and it's not determined by these pitch considerations like in Greek. So we would just say naias in Latin, but it's naias in ancient Greek and naiados, even though, of course, it would just be naiadis in the Latin pronunciation. And here it equals naias in the original Greek. And there's even a nice, apparently. That's cool. And we see this nice version as well. So this is giving us a lot of information. If we know Latin, we can look up a lot of, at least names often are frequently in Latin that are taken from mythology and things like that, or place names. And if they're not there, then, well, if you can't find it on Wiktionary, you can't find it on Latinitium's dictionaries, which are, of course, the Lewis and Short LNS. And if you can't find an LSJ and so forth, then you might just have to guess. But usually this is more than enough for me to be able to find every single term I need in order to know the phonemic vowel lengths. So now that we've seen these three primary tools that I like to take advantage of, let's actually put this into practice. And we're going to put it into practice with this lovely book, the Ephodion that goes with Volume 2 of Athenaze, which, unlike every other book in the Athenaze series and in the Vivarium Novum editions, this one for some reason doesn't have the macrons. And I am certain it's just because they were lazy. No, I don't know. I mean, I don't see any reason not to. It takes time, but the pedagogical value is extremely high, and I don't see any reason to publish any text, Latin or ancient Greek, if it's the literature, especially if it's for even advanced learners like this, intermediate to advanced or whatever, that there shouldn't be macrons. There's no reason that you publish Caesar's Gallic Wars or Plato without the macrons, except maybe you don't know where they are. Anyway, so let's add macrons to a bit of Xenophon, because this has Xenophon, and it has Apollodorus, and it has Herodotus. Let's do some of the Xenophon. All right, so here is the Dopo il capitolo 26, the 26th chapter in Athenaze. That's in volume 2. So let's macronize this. All right, so we start with Kyros, exalaurne, epipulas. All right, so here we have a thing that we have to figure out. Pulas. Now, what kind of word is this? We'd have to know that this is a first declension noun, and therefore that this is the accusative as. How could we look that up for sure? Well, I'll show you. We could go to Wiktionary and type in this word, pula. We'd even do pulas, which is really nice. Sometimes you could put in the form that's not the dictionary form, not the nominative singular. And we say pulas. We already see accusative plural of pule. And we could, of course, go to the pule entry. Epic we'll ignore for now. Look at Attic and confirm, aha, there is the form that we're looking at here of the epipulas. So that's long. That's good. So that's what tells us that this is pulas. Okay. And then we see tes, gilakias. Okay, but what is this? What is this? And we look over on the left. This is nice that we have this as part of the entry. And we see that it's he, gilikia, tes, gilikias. Well, there's no doubt. This has to be long because it's just like he, Italia, tes, gilikias. That's great. So this is gilikias. Oh, but there's a problem. We have two iotas. This is definitely going to be short regularly. There's no reason for that iota to be long. I mean, it's possible, but no, it's not going to be. But these two iotas could be long. Well, okay. So how do we figure that out? Well, we go to Logion and type kilikia. Okay, we get, look, there it is, kilikia. And what do we have here under kilikia? We have, well, it tells us it's feminine. And here it's telling us that this, which is extremely cryptic, and shows us just how lazy these people are. From the 19th century, that they're just showing you this geek. It's trying to tell us that the first iota is short. So the breve, the breve mark is over. And this one is also short in front of the second kappa. Wow, is that lazy? You could have just written these things over the original entry, but maybe we don't want to trust that. All right, that's fine. Then we could go to Wiktionary and type kilikia. Okay, there it is again, kilikia, and confirm, all right, kilix, short, here it is in the IPA, short, and here short, regularly marked with a breve. Very nice. And if that was something we couldn't trust, we could also Latinize it. How could that be Latinized? Well, I'm going to use a C, and look, there they all are, the breves. We have confirmed in many different ways that these are in fact short iotas. And you don't necessarily need to use all of those tools for this word, because we did even have enough information in the original Logion, but this is kind of cryptic compared to, I didn't search for that. I know Kia, it's a car. Anyway, we can figure it out from any one of the pieces of evidence. All right, so that's good. Let's go back to the book. So we know these are definitely short. So we don't need to touch them. Short vowels, if your convention, which is mine, and the convention that's most common, is just to leave unmarked those vowels that are short. I recommend that because that just keeps things economical. But you can do whatever you want. So, okay, so nothing to worry about here. Now, here's an iota, right? This iota How do we know it's short? And I know this text is more advanced. It's not beginner text. It's because I already macronized all my beginner texts, and this is what I'm currently macronizing. So I need to show you something, right? So this iota here, it's a short iota. How do I? Oh no, I marked it. This is why I use pencil, by the way, so I can get rid of these marks, especially if I make a mistake. What if I were wrong about that and I learned later? So this iota is short. How do I know that? I can actually tell that from the accents. If the accents are correct, and sometimes these books really mess that up, Athena's A series tends to be pretty good. This shis, the accent is not on the one before, which means that it's impossible. It's not on the final. It's not on the penultimate. It's on the antepenultimate. That means this must be a short vowel. And I skipped here because studias, this hypsilon, how do we, well, this is long because it's te, studias. No doubt there that this is long. We have he, studia, just like kikilia, and italia, and sikilia. Okay, that's easy to know. But what about the hypsilon? Is that long or short? Great question. We look that up. We'd find it in the dictionary. Well, let's do it. Come on. We want to do this. So let us go to, hey, I've seen this word before in Latin. I'm trying to remember. What was her name? Studia? What is it? And here, wait, why is it written long? And why is it written as short? Oh, no. This is confusing. But here, studius is written short. It's short everywhere except for here, except for the main entry. Oh, my God. Loose and short. What are you doing to me? Okay, wait a minute. I'm going through a panic attack. Why did I look at the Latin first? Now I'm super confused. This is what we all go through, right? And go, studia is saying, hey, studia, and here it's telling me it's short. That's what this is telling me, that this u in the preceding word is short. Again, why don't you just write in the original entry? I don't know. Anyway, that's what they like to do. Okay, well, what about the word for Syrian, which is a syros or syra? This is coming up as an acute, and it's again telling me short. There's no circumflex. It would have to be syros, like it's gyros. It would have to be a circumflex for this to be a long hypsilon here. Why? Because the final vowel in the word is short in that last syllable. Thus, this must be short too. If it were long, it would have to be a circumflex. I hope that's clear. If not, just write in the comments. You get this stuff through practice. It's not something you memorize easily all at once. Okay, so the loose and short confused me. This really happened to me in the past. I wouldn't have to do all this today, but I'm showing you just for the sake of, showing you. So I type studia in Wiktionary, and what does it give me? All right, short again, studie, regularly short. There's no hint of the long vowel that loose and short gave us. So this one instance in the whole thing threw us into this confusion, but we have a good set of data points now to come to the conclusion, I think a very reasonable conclusion, that this vowel is short, more than enough for me to say, okay, it's definitely short in the word. So we're not going to mark it as long. We're going to leave it as short. Yay! Okay. So this is studia. It is studia, and so forth, so we don't need to make the hypsilon long. Well, that's good. Okay. I also like to macronize, of course, the marginal notes too, and often these terms help there. But we'll stay with the main text for now. So, duo, deke, so we have inherent long vowels, epsilon iota, eta always long, the omega here, pros, kilikia, purake. How do we know that the hypsilon is short? We would know that by looking it up, and we'd have the same answer. How do I know that the hypsilon is short? The same way that I know that this word starts with letter phi and not the letter pi. The same way that I know that this is a lambda and not a rho, and the word purake. It's not purake. It's not butake. It's not some other consonant here. Thus, it's not a different vowel. You have to really treat vowel length as something that's part of the spelling of the word, that's part of the inherent identity of the word, whatever pronunciation system you choose to use. Okay, so prote, studias, basileos. Is this iota long? Let's check it. Let's just go and prove my point about all of this. Here, we'll start with Leos. We see, marked as short. Okay, we've confirmed that one is short. Yay! Okay, this is good. So when you learn that it's short, then you hopefully are reciting it. Even if you're saying Vasileos or Vasileos or whatever you want to use, a modern or Boreval pronunciation of Greek, that's fine. You can say elegeto. You can use those things, but the vowel lengths, that's the You can't get out of that. You can do all kinds of modifications of the qualities of consonants and vowels, but the vowel length is too fundamental to the literature and to the grammar. That can't be filtered. That can't be altered in order to interact with the literature in a meaningful way as intended for the original audience. Okay, so then we have più and in is always e, not a. This is not a. This is e. It's a long monophthong. Okay, the amesu, just like u is a monophthong. It's not o. It's u. And then re, tu, ton, potamos. Is this alpha long in potamos? We could look it up and we'd see that is in fact short using any of the tools that we looked at before. Garsos onoma. And we see hapan. What is that? Hapan. That's a little weird. What's a hapan? We'd have to, is that a name? It's capitalized. Or is it something else that you may already know this word? And if you don't know it, you could type it, write it in just as it is into Logian. And what is this giving us? Ooh, this is giving us all kinds of padre, papa, avad. What is, this is all strange. None of this is helping. Uh-oh. Let me go to Wiktionary and see if Wiktionary can help me. And I type it in there as written, and then it gives me hapan. So the neuter, nominative, accusative, or the vocative, singular hapas. Here it's written as short. Okay, but let me go to the entry and see what it says. Here it's saying, okay, so hapas, feminine hapasa, and neuter hapan is short. Well, that's very interesting. Okay, hapan, neuter is short. Okay. Of course, this is just a more emphatic version of the word pas, meaning all. And when I put this in here, we see hapas, hapasa. We see, okay, hapan. So we maybe learned that this is the word hapas, and we've also learned the fact that the pan here is short, which is very interesting because it's not short in the neuter without that. So we've learned a new quirk of the Attic dialect of Greek, a new characteristic of this ancient Greek language, that it will have, sometimes it'll be long, sometimes it'll be short. So this we can leave alone. This is not long, and I'm sure there are occasions where it ends up being long in ancient Greek. Okay, so we're looking for more. Where could there be more long vowels? Okay, well, seeing this bat, I know that bat is often short in other compounds. Will it be short this time? Let's go to Logian. And it is telling me short alpha, because the I had an accent on it. The iota has an accent on it. That's why they didn't mark it with the brief, because I guess they're lazy. Or didn't have the right typewriter. In any case, the iota here is short. Okay, good. And the alpha too. Nice, okay. Libatoi. That's a nice ba-ba-ba-ba word. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Burai. There's burai again. Nothing to change here. We know that the hypsilon is short. How do we know that? Just from how it's written. Alpha iota as a diphthong isn't actually really a diphthong when it's final. It's really a short alpha plus a consonantal y sound. Phonetically, it's the same, but when it comes to the underlying structure of the prosody of the language, this is a short final vowel. That means that this hypsilon has to be short, and of course we saw that earlier. We know that that vowel is short because we already learned that word a little while ago. But if we didn't remember, we could have the orthography to guide us. So it's interesting, these more super segmental stuff, the pitch accent kind of thing, is showing us the underlying segmental fundamental nature of the language, which is interesting. Okay, so tautes, seneca, tes, parodu. Oh, that reminds me. Look at, if there's a circumflex over a vowel, that vowel must be long. And therefore, in the other inflected forms, it's going to maintain that length with a very, very few exceptions. They exist, and I think we might encounter one later. Oops. Okay, so we were here. So kyros, tas. Okay, this is the article. You might as well memorize the articles and their lengths. There we go. Hoplitas is what I wanted to look for. So, what is this word? If we don't know that this is the word for hoplite, we might be confused, and we maybe not even know what declension is. Okay, well, let's just type this in to something, Wiktionary or Logion, and figure it out. Okay, let's start with Logion since we're here. So oblitas, that's pretty much how it's written in the book. It's telling us oblitas. Well, it's interesting it has an entry here, because I would have expected to. Basically, this is giving us the Doric version, which is interesting. But it is giving us a long iota. That's convenient. Okay, let's type this into Wiktionary too. Oblitas. Let's see what it gives us. It tells us accusative plural of oblites. That's right, for Attic. Doric, it actually works as the nominative as well. And here it's showing us that this is a long iota, and now we know this is a first declension masculine, and we can see that tous hoplitas, that's what this word is. Now, nice thing about logion, whatever you want to pronounce it, I'm going to put in the nominative here, is you can also do the inverse. As lovely as this thing is, this can do this. Now I've inverted it. Now I see the similar endings of all these other words. Let me find another one I like. Here we go. Talamites. This is a long iota as well. The same kind of thing, or lowest bench and so forth. We'd also find polites, XIII. This means like wood. Anyway, we have learned with this inverse feature, there are a lot of similar morphological endings. So while we didn't know this before, we can add this to our internal vocabulary, our internal sense of the morphology and where long vowels go. This is the way you have to do it. You have to build this up little by little, and eventually we will be able to have an internal sense of the phonemic vowel length. And actually, that's an advantage to doing this on your own to the text. I'm sure you have plenty of available texts that don't have the macrons on them in Greek, because you will learn by going through this process of trying to find all the phonemic vowel lengths. You will internally learn where they're supposed to be, and thus, as you recite, you will learn that, for example, hoplitas, this is long, and that this kind of ending is very typical of the language. And then you can apply that. So you're doing a conscious learning about this ending to then create input such that you can acquire this in a more fundamental, fluent way. Okay, so we're going through here. We see bulon, this one. We already know bulon from before. That one is short because of the same word. And then we have biashomenos. Oh, okay, biashomenos. What is this? Maybe we don't even recognize the term. That could go for all these. If you don't know the word, then we have to look it up. Is this alpha long or short? Is the iota long? Well, I don't know. My intuition tells me that iota is going to be short. Of course, I already know this word, but let's imagine I don't. And I try to look it up. Nada on logion. Let me go to Wiktionary and biashomenos. What's so nice, I can type it and actually get it. And I see some other inflectional forms here. And eventually, of course, it'll biasmenos, not biasmenos, biasomenos. There we go. I type in biasomenos, and it doesn't have it here. It says cannot be found. But if you scroll down a little bit, we see it is under this entry. That's cool. We can actually figure out there's a future participle, biasomenos. And in any case, it's short, which works, and it kind of makes sense if we, already know the meaning. So that's good. Let us now continue. Biashomenos, tous polemius, I pylatoienepitais, syriais, pylais, operoi top poiesin, gyros. Okay, that one's long. Okay, come on. Okay, here we go. Of course, you put the new word, this crazy noun, abrokomas. You put this divided. Boy, do I hate this for pedagogical stuff, or really any books. I know they're trying to save space and fill out the line, and I detest it. Anyway, so abrokomas. Okay, what is this? We see ho, and ends in an as. Is it like aineas? Is it a first declension masculine noun like that? And then that's okay. That's good. That's probably what it is. But wait a minute. Tu abrokoma. What is this? Is this supposed to be long or short? I'm super confused. What the heck is this? Let's go to Wiktionary. Maybe Wiktionary will help us out. Wiktionary always helps us out. In fact, we'll just do logion. Let's go. This is sort of that's with the dictionary. Abrokomas. You can start with any order you want. I'm just kind of doing this. And this tells us diddly squat. Nada. Dice nada. Gracias por nada. Because it's just this DGE, this dictionary. Okay, so this tells us absolutely nothing. Abrokomas. We put that in there. We get it. Okay, a satrap Persian king. Okay, this is the right context. Okay, here's the declension. And then we get this. Abrokomas, tu abrokomu. Okay, but we just saw that it's genitive tu abrokoma. Long here. So what is it? Is this the right word? What are we dealing with? And then we think, wait a minute. As should come after a rho, an eta, or as should come after iota, after epsilon, or after rho. How can it possibly come after a mu? Then remember, there's another famous name that does that too, which is Leonidas. It should be Leonides. except it's not Attic. Leonidas is the quintessential Spartan, the quintessential Doric, right? Well, how does this declension work? O Leonidas, tu Leonida. And of course the an in the accusative. So this is the Doric declension that's been adapted into Attic and Koine. Instead of saying Leonides, Leonidas, he gets to retain his Doric declension in most Attic prose, and Koine for that matter. And that's what we see here. This name, for whatever reason, it is in a Doric declension. I don't actually know why in this particular case. Maybe it's just better represents the Persian, maybe because interaction between Persians and Doric speakers. In any case, we now know that's what's going on. This is a long alpha, and it is a first declension now. Even though it's doing something weird, we've adapted to it, and we're moving on. Okay. I'm skipping over some of these because some of them might be long, some of them might be short, and we learn that through practice. Now we have this anastrepsas. Now remember when I was telling you about the aorists, how the aorist participle, the masculine, it's as. Then we think, well, wait a minute. Isn't there a short as? Yes, if it were ane with the augment, anastrepsas, which does exist, but instead it's anastrepsas, and I know that. Oh, wait a minute. What am I pretend I don't know that? Let's go to Wiktionary. Maybe if I actually type the whole word, anastrepsas, into Wiktionary. Oh, nothing. Well, that's not helpful. Wait a minute. Maybe I just need to write the accents. Anastrepsas. Does that help? Nope. Okay. Oh, no. All right. Let me get rid of the ana and then see what happens. Okay. Good. Because we know the ana is a prefix. Got rid of that. Here I'm already seeing this as the participle, the aorist participle. Go down the aorist. I see strepsas. While, of course, estrepsas, short, also exists. So anastrepsas would be short, but anastrepsas has the long alpha. Isn't this fun? Are you having fun? This is how I have fun. Okay. So that's anastrepsas, the participle. Then we have poinikes. Let me see, poinike. You remember from how I'm pronouncing it, how the length is. But again, let's look it up. We're not leaving. We're learning how to do this as a process. We don't want to mark, it's in pencil, which is the point. We can put poinike and see if we get anything. If we type it in Legion, poinike. No, let me get rid of inverse. Here we go. Maybe we can get some here. Poinike, poinike. Aha, that's what we wanted down here. Poinike. It's also a long iota, and that's really enough. But, interestingly, there are exceptions to this. We might know that poinix, the phoenix, which is fundamentally the same etymology, has a circumflex. That means the iota here should be short, not long. Oh, what's going on? Well, there are a few words like these which are weird. Here it's telling us that the eek in the inflected forms, like the genitive, anything but the nominative, that iota is long. So it's not poinix, so it's not a long poinix, long iota in the nominative, it's poinix. It is, however, long in the genitive poinikos, poinika, and so forth, which is why it ends up being long in the word for Phoenicia, poinike. And there's another word that does this, gerux, the herald. So it's, here, that's interesting. Here it's written with the acute, because I picked this one by accident. There we go. So this is the normal form we see in Attic, gerux, short. How is it short? How do we know that? Because this is a circumflex, mandatory. And yet the inflected forms are long. Do you think this is difficult? You absolutely have every right to feel that way. You still have to know it. This is mandatory knowledge for the language. Nobody said that learning languages had to be super easy. And so there. Do the hard work. No, I'm sorry. I'm being kind of teasing a little bit, just because ancient Greek. If you've seen my ancient Greek comedy video, you know that there's a lot of, you have to have a sense of humor about the struggle. Because it's not that bad, and you can use, obviously, the resources that I like to make available, videos such as this one, in order to make this easier, if not fun. I don't expect it to be fun. Nah, it should be fun. You want us to be fun in some level. I find this fun. Because I've done this with pretty much every text I've had that wasn't macronized. Anything I've read, I've macronized it in pencil like this, if it's my own copy. Because of that, I can now see any text without the macrons and usually recite all of the phonemic vowel lengths that aren't written correctly because I just know where they are. Like I know that in triaconta, it's long. How do I know that? Well, I did have a video I did on Scorpio Martiano, so all the numbers. And I do often, if I do like push-ups or some other physical exercise, I like to count in ancient Greek so that I learn the ancient Greek numbers. So it's tria conta, but it's tetra conta for 40. So 30 is long and 40 is short. Yay, Greek. Okay. Let's get to this last little page here, and we see another, we see a myrias. Oh, good. Hey, myrias. And we see this genitive form, myriados. Because of that, we know that the alpha in the nominative is also short. And we can confirm that by looking on Wiktionary. But we'd also have to know that the root vowel is long. Oh, it looks terrible. But anyway, you get the idea. Normally I do this much closer to the page, but I have a camera in this case. So, myrias, tes myriados. And it's myriad, of course, 10,000. So, myrioi, myrioi. All right, so that's long. Is this telling me that also this guy's name, Myriandros, is this a long one too? And we could look that up and find that, yes, indeed, it's also a long hypsilon. We also have poinikes, poinikon, from poinike. And notice how this is again demonstrative of how the phonemic vowel length in the prosody, it says what affecting where the pitch accent goes. It can be poinikes because the final vowel is short. That's why the accent is recessive, as it tends to be in this situation, yet is forced forward to the penultimate syllable, poinike. It has to be there because of the phonemic vowel length underlying everything. Phonemic vowel length is everything. If you don't know phonemic vowel length, you don't yet know ancient Greek, no matter how well you know a whole bunch of other things. It's part of the mandatory knowledge you have to pick up. So we have horkades. We have another one of these ades words. Ades, adas. Adas in the accusative. Ades here. Ados in the genitive. Hemeras. We know this is, of course, we look up hemera, the word for day. We look up all these things. Wasn't that fun? That was fun. Do you want to do this one too? Maybe not this time. Maybe you should try on your own and see what you come up. If you have this text, another text, put your questions in the description about all this because I'm trying to cover as much as I possibly can. There are weird things too, like, for example, Jalisco Mai, right? So to become captive, a prisoner. And then we have Healo, he became a prisoner. How do we know this is long? Oh, we'd have to look that up to figure out that thing. That's weird. What about krepis? This ends in an is. This is a good morphology thing to learn. Hekrepis. So let's look up krepis. And when we do, we see the genitive is krepidos. Whoa, that's not what we expected. Krepidos. It's long. Well, that's irritating because my book here, has it as short. Krepis, krepidos. So what's going on? Is this long or short? Because Logion is showing me that, hey, this is a long vowel. So which one is it? Is it... But we see krepides. That's very regular as well. Let's try Wiktionary. Well, Wiktionary is telling me that, no, it's in fact short here. Okay. But the genitive is krepidos. Okay. Isn't that unusual? And then harpis. Let me look up this harpis word, see if it does anything interesting. Harpis. Harpidos. All right, it's pretty consistent about this being a long vowel in both of these words. And we see the same thing here. What we don't have is telling us that the nominative singular ought to be short. And it does not necessarily so. It could be krepis or krepis. Wiktionary is saying that there is a variation between the nominative and the inflected forms. That is entirely possible. Another thing we can do is hit the inverse here and see some other terms like krepis. Does that tell us anything? Well, here's an acute, so that would have to be short. Krepis. Krepis again. Lepis. We see lepidos. Well, what about the word for shield? Aspis. Aspis, aspidos. So short. So, wow. What have we learned here? That because the editor of this book didn't know their phonemic vowel length or didn't care, the incorrect length is demonstrated here. Not merely in the fact that, of course, the macrons aren't written any at all, but this can't possibly be acute. Here, and then whenever I find an error, I just do that. Because it's not just a macron that's missing. This is an error in the fundamental orthography. It has to be krepidos. In fact, I'm familiar with the term that I know that it really has to be a circumflex there, even though it's krepis. Whether or not the nominative is long, I might have to do some more investigation to figure that out. But we know from poinix and kerix that you can have variations between the length and the nominative form. I'm fine with that being short in the nominative, but this must be long in the inflected form. So, massive mistake. The editor should be painfully embarrassed because when people write the macrons in their texts, they have a fundamental knowledge of the phonemic vowel length, and they don't make mistakes like that. So don't ignore phonemic vowel length. It's really important. And I just remembered one that I think I did while I was talking there is Basilea. It's long. How do I know that Basilea is long? Because I know that the nominative form is Basileus, and I know that nouns of that type, like Odysseus and so forth, that their accusative singular form is short epsilon long alpha ea. And that's just something you pick up by doing this, by going through this exercise of macronizing your own texts. It is a little bit like, as we say in Italian, mamma mia, che palle, that you have to actually go do all this on your own to get the language, the written language where it needs to be, so it's a better source of input. But it's extremely valuable because you do really learn a lot. And even though I picked on the little mistakes, is it idos or iidos? Which one is it? And there is variation in the language. Some of those things we just have to learn by doing, and it's entirely possible that it was just a little mistake. There can be all kinds of mistakes that anybody can make in a language whose orthography is very sophisticated. It's very sophisticated. It makes Latin orthography, which really just has the macrons to deal with, pretty simple by comparison. Also, it happens to be an alphabet that we as English speakers know and presumably love. But I don't doubt that I missed something that could have been really valuable to add to this discussion, or you might have questions that could get to some important nuance or some thing that could really help others. So leave that in the comments if you have those questions. If you're still puzzled about how to go about this, let me know, because it's really, 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 really important that with Latin and Ancient Greek, you learn where all the long vowels are. Adding macrons to your own texts is a great way to do that. So if you have questions, leave them below. I really look forward to reading your comments. So Caritas bolas huminoida, gratias vobis ago. Thanks again to the Ancient Language Institute. Check out the link in the description. And thanks to each and every one of my Patreon supporters. Valete kai hygienete.